Hey everyone, it's good to be back with you after about a month and a half hiatus. Today I'd like to talk with you about the greatest hindrance to pastors in the coming year. And I think you're going to be surprised. It's not what you might think. Back in a moment. In my early 50s, I was weighing in at about 220 to 225 pounds. For some of you listening, that might not seem like such a big deal until you consider that my height is about 5'9" if I'm on my tiptoes. At that height, my normal weight should be somewhere between 160 and 170 pounds, basically by the charts. So at 220 to 225 pounds, I was between 50 and 60 pounds overweight. I have to say, as I looked around to other pastors, that they were pretty much in the same boat as I. In fact, many of them were heavier than me at that time. Now, I had noticed things that many of you notice in day-to-day life. It's harder to get up in the morning. There's a lot more aches and pains. I think the typical statement is it's tough to get old. You hear that from just about everybody over 40. And they're usually referring to aches and pains that they're experiencing. I was also experiencing a certain amount of buzzing in my ears, and I felt a certain amount of, dizziness at times. So finally I went to see a doctor, and they prescribed high blood pressure pills for me. Said, your blood pressure is way out of whack. Now, one of the things that I find about pastors, and this is what I want to talk with you about today, is that whether we admit it or not, we tend to abuse our bodies. In fact, when you look in the scriptures and look at the sicknesses that are ascribed to ministers, 3 out of 4 of them speak about ministers who are sick because of abusing their health. They're exhausted. They're not functioning correctly. And in fact, in today's world, that really applies to many pastors. We do not look at the natural laws that are regulating our health, our sleep, our recreation, basically the things that normal people take care of. As a result, most pastors are very overweight and out of shape. And this is the greatest hindrance that I see to ministers in this coming year, in fact, into many coming years. So when I went to that doctor, he told me that I had high blood pressure, and he told me the things that I didn't want to hear, like you're overweight. Well, duh, I could tell that by looking at my belt line and the size of my pants. That told me that I was overweight. But I really didn't pay much attention to it. And I attended, a number of weeks later, I attended a pastor's retreat in another part of the state, and I met up with I shouldn't say I met up with, but I was in the same room with a pastor of I think it was an Anglican church, or it was an Episcopalian church at the time. And I took an instant dislike to him. Even as he expressed himself among the group, it just seemed like he had a way about him that just hit me the wrong way. I didn't like his manner. And I know that probably doesn't apply to you. You love everybody, but I do run into those problems. In any case, in the course of conversation, somehow or another, he walked right over to me, and I'd never met him before. And he said to me these words. He said, if you don't care about your health, no one else will. And then he promptly walked away. He didn't give me the opportunity to turn around and belt him one, which is what I really felt like doing at the time. Like, who was this guy coming up to me and saying these words? You don't even know me, and you're speaking to me about my health, and effectively you're rebuking me. But what he said was very painful, but it was also very true. And I thought about that very long and hard after that retreat was over. If you're not paying attention to your health, is what he was saying, no one else will. That's a real truism. People love you, and they'll surround you with their love. They don't really care much about your weight or your health, as long as you're in their church, or maybe you're a guest speaker or whatever it is. They're not going to speak to you about that because it's none of their business. But if you don't make it your business, it can really have deadly effects. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. My best friend in the world, really one of my best friends in the world, passed away just a few months ago. And I've mentioned him on the podcast. His name was Jan Nel. He was a South African minister. Some of the people who listen to this podcast have heard of him before. Maybe he's ministered in their churches. Truly a great, great man of God and a wonderful, wonderful friend. One of the great challenges with Jan was that he was very heavy, and he had issues with his body that were really difficult. His legs were always bothering him. He had difficulty walking, especially in those last months of his life. He had very much difficulty walking and getting around. And we had discussions about this through the years. I spoke with him about his health, but it was something where it really was not something that he could really grasp a hold of and how to manage it. And so as a result, he passed away. And quite frankly, he's the same age as I am today, 66. He passed away from COVID-19. Many people have been afflicted by that. But when you look at how COVID got him, it was really in concert with his weight. Jan was really a happy-go-lucky guy. He made friends easily, and people around the world saw him as their best friend. Now, my friendship went a little deeper than just an acquaintance. We spent quite a few days and hours and months and years together. But in the course of that dynamic, I noticed that, and it was not hard to see, that Jan was severely overweight. He was in the neighborhood of probably 100 pounds overweight in these last final days. I mean, he was large. Now, he was a big guy to start with. He measured up at 6 feet. And he had been an athlete in his younger years. He had broad shoulders. He was a big guy. He was a formidable person just to start with. But when you added weight to it, he was essentially gigantic when he finally passed away. And a lot of it was in his stomach. That's where a lot of it accumulated. I want to share a little bit more about Jan in a moment, but just to get back to the original story, at 220 pounds, 220 to 225 pounds, after my doctor said to me, you've got high blood pressure, and after this very obnoxious minister said to me, if you don't take care of your health, no one will, I made a decision that I needed to do something about my weight. Now, all of my life, I've been on the heavy side, and that's still a challenge for me. If you look at this on video, you're not seeing a guy who's 98 pounds. I love to eat. I've never met a gallon of ice cream that I couldn't take down in one sitting. I like food, and I'm sure that you do too. But the challenge with food is it can become an addiction. It can become the place we go when we feel lonely, when we feel stressed, when we feel a struggle going on. Maybe somebody in our church is being really difficult. Maybe there's somebody who's being very critical of us, or maybe we're finding that there's certain prayers that are not getting answered in a timely fashion. It's very easy to get that instant comfort that comes from eating something you enjoy. And then when we eat it, we end up eating more and more and more, and oftentimes more than we should. And we think about, well, I'll diet tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes the next day, and comes the next day, and comes the next day. And I have a saying, if you eat like there's no tomorrow, there won't be. If you eat like there's no tomorrow, there won't be. And so one of the things that happened in my life, this may be a help to you, is I found a book that's not even a Christian book to my knowledge, but it's called The Slight Edge. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Olson. If you ever get the chance to read it, it's a great read. It'll help you in a lot of areas of life. But in my particular case, although I did not read it for the purpose of dieting, that's really how it helped me. The concept behind the slight edge is that you can accomplish virtually any goal in your life if you will attack it in small measures. And so I began to apply that to the whole issue of dieting, a whole issue of eating, and began to look at what the whole deal is with eating. I investigated this a little bit. I looked at some people who are really into this particular field. In fact, all of them, none of them Christian, but people who had results. They lost weight, they've kept it off, that sort of thing. What I began to realize was actually common sense, but I'd never discovered it before, and that's that a pound essentially equals 3,500 calories. So if you can eliminate 3,500 calories from your diet per week, mathematically speaking, you will lose a pound each week. It's just common sense and common science. If you do that consistently, that means over a 52-week period, you will lose 50 pounds per year. It also goes the other way. The slight edge can go positively or negatively. If you eat 3,500 calories more per week, you'll gain a pound a week, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's exactly what happened to me. I've been married for a couple of decades, and I had put on weight. I was at one time 155 pounds, but I was up at 225 pounds. Well, I didn't get there overnight. I got there one piece of cake at a time, one bowl of ice cream at a time. And again, as ministers, oftentimes we are using food as an addiction. We look at people who take drugs, and we're trying to get people off drugs. We're trying to get people off various addictions. But I think one of the worst addictions, especially among pastors, is eating. If you go on and look on television, some of the most well-known pastors are huge. They are addicted to food. And again, we justify it in various ways. We say, well, I'm older, that kind of thing. When you're older, your body is less able to handle the stress. And this is what happens to many people, not just pastors, but as you get successful in life or you get to a feeling that you're making headway in life, we tend to celebrate by food. And many people who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s are way overweight at a time when their heart has less strength. They're exercising less, their bodies are not strong, and their heart is not getting up in the morning and say, please stop. They can't hear their heart speaking. But the way the body speaks to us is it communicates to us by joint pain, it communicates to us by foot pain, it communicates to us by high blood pressure, it communicates, and it's trying to say to us, please change your life. Now, in my particular case, in those 50s, I ended up going on a diet that it was basically finding out what my daily requirements are for the size that I am. I used an app, a well-known app now, it's called MyFitnessPal, to determine exactly how many calories per day that I needed. And then I eliminated 500 calories per day from my diet. And I had to monitor the calories that were going into my body, which was initially rather annoying, but after a while, it was very easy to do. And I began to lose weight. In fact, I got down to about 185 pounds, which was pretty good for me. At that time, Jan noticed and he said, wow, that's great what you're doing. Can you help me? And I sat down with him and I started to prescribe to him, listen, here's some situations. Here's what you can do to lose weight. These were a number of years ago. And I believe that he genuinely wanted to lose weight. But here's the problem. And one of the things that I wanted to address with you today, especially as a traveling minister, everywhere he went, people fed him. He had no way to screen the food that was coming his way unless he was really diligent. And being the kind of person he was, he always didn't want to offend his host, so whatever they served him, he'd eat. And oftentimes, the people who served him the most were the largest people. Everyone around him was feeding him more and more and more and more and more because they loved him. And food can become that actual addiction. We don't realize that it's just not okay for us to keep putting more food into our bodies than we can take. It's violating our bodies, and it's violating a common sense. Eventually, what happens to pastors and lots that happens to people who get in their older years, many people die before their time because their body just won't take it anymore. I am not 185 pounds today. I, gradually over time, again, I'm an ice cream guy. It's easy to get back up there. And I found myself even getting back up again into the 200s and then the 205s before I said, wait a minute, I'm falling into some of the same problems. This isn't something you can just do once and be done with. So even though I had lost, some 40 pounds years ago, I just found that over the years, the last 10 years, I've been just putting on a pound here, a pound here, a pound there, a pound there. And I began to say, no, that can't happen anymore. So after my recent trip to Zimbabwe, and I noticed I put on weight going to Zimbabwe, which is ironic, I came home and said, I've got to get back on track here. So since that time, I've lost another 15 pounds. I've got 15 to go. I'm at about 195 right now. I've got to get down to 180. And so you hold me accountable to that. But I want to share with you that losing that weight is not as difficult as you might think. And many pastors will not engage in weight loss because they think it's just too hard. If you try to lose 5 pounds a week, you'll never do it. If you try to go on a silly diet that, eat all the meat you can and don't eat anything else, yeah, you'll lose the weight and you'll gain it back the next week. You've got to get into a situation where you begin to see what you're eating and see what is coming into your body and do something about it. Now, we're just coming off of Christmas, and I got to tell you, there was an apple pie waiting for me this time around. I'm not going to tell you that I didn't eat that apple pie because I did. I love that apple pie. But I also know that tomorrow I'm back in the gym, and that's another thing I want to talk to you about, getting some real exercise. We have a very sedentary type of existence as a pastor and as a minister. Most of our life is sitting. We're reading, we're studying, we're counseling, we're meeting with various people and having lunch with them and having breakfast with them, and having dinner with them. We're seemingly always eating. We're around food all the time. We're around people all the time, but none of it is really exercise oriented. If you don't make time in your life for real exercise, your body will pay you back with aches and pains. And so I needed to get to the gym. And I want to tell you something. I've been going to the gym for several years now. I go to the gym about twice a week. I'm trying to move it up to 3. I want to tell you something. I despise going to the gym. I still hate to go to the gym every single time. Once I get there, I'm okay. I'll listen to a podcast, or I'll listen to music, or spend the time praying. It's fine when I get there, but getting out of bed and getting out the door, that's the hardest thing for me. Still, it's never a situation where it says, yes, I want to go exercise, because I really don't want to. I'd rather make excuses. But getting out that door, I've found, is critical to my own health. And it is critical to the way I feel, how I am mentally. Everything else comes into play when I begin to put some principles into play, which is just exercise. Find some exercises that you can begin to do. Don't go crazy at the gym either. Just get on a treadmill, maybe walk, and build yourself up to a place where maybe you can do a little fast walking or incline walking or something like that. Get your cardio up. If you're somebody who wants to lift weights, again, do that in a gradual fashion. There's plenty of videos on YouTube that can show you, depending on your age, what you can do to begin to exercise more. But get started. That's the critical thing. Don't allow this year to go by and just make it an idea. Yeah, one of these days I got to do this, because one of these days will become no days if you're not careful. When Jan died just a few months ago, it was a real terrible shock to many of us, because he was such a fighter, and he was by nature someone who was just ready for a fight, whatever it was. And it shocked us, even though we knew that he was severely overweight, big guy. It was a real shock to us, and it's still a shock to us. It's a shock to his family, and it's a great loss to the body of Christ. Again, I wish he didn't pass away. I know that he's with the Lord. I know that his reward is wonderful. I know that I'll see him again. All of that is good. I miss him desperately. And I have to feel, I wish that there was a way that I could have gotten through to him even stronger, to watch what he was putting in his mouth. Because, again, people are feeding you every day. They're giving you roasts and pies and everything else, and they think they're blessing you. But more often than not, you need to say, stop. There was a Japanese fellow that encountered him about 12 years ago, and he really got angry with him. It was a pastor. They were having a conversation. In the middle of it, this guy was very abrupt with him, just like this minister had been abrupt with me, and really didn't have any right to say this, but he said to Jan, I'm going to show you an exercise that will help you lose weight. And then he just took and pushed the plate away from his body. And what he was saying to Jan is, stop eating. The message was a good message, and it was a helpful message, but there was no love in it. When you don't minister because you really care about people, it doesn't have much of an effect. I'm blessed that I did take the good advice from a minister who really didn't have my heart necessarily didn't care about me. I mean, he was very abrupt because that was his personality. I'm glad that I took his advice, because it was good advice. It would have been better if a friend had said that to me, though. I think it would have been easier for me to implement into my life. And, it's not a matter of just trying to hurt people and say, you're overweight. That's not going to help them. We really want to help people lose weight. I'm on this podcast trying to help you with this myself, as someone who's on the same journey. And it's a journey that I'm going to be on for the rest of my life. I know that I've got to watch what I eat. I know that I've got to exercise. I know that I've got to get to the gym. And now that I'm 66, it's free, which is my favorite price. So it even makes it easier. However, it's still difficult. Got to get up, got to do it. Get in the gym, get moving, get exercising, make some progress. And the one thing I loved about the slight edge philosophy is, whenever you make any progress towards your goal, you need to celebrate it. Now, in the case of eating, you don't celebrate it by eating, but you need to give yourself a pat on the back when you've pushed that piece of cake away, or when you've dropped your intake for that day. If you've made progress, great. You have a piece of pie the next day and you're a little off, fine, you get back on track. That's the critical thing I loved about that book, is that it really encouraged you, even if you failed, even if you made mistakes, even if you fell down, I just encourage you, get back up, get moving towards the goal that you want. You're either moving towards the goals that you are blessed by, or you're moving against those goals with every decision you make in life. That's the idea behind The Slight Edge, but I encourage you to read it anyway. It's just a great, encouraging type of book. All of that being said, this has been a long podcast today, but I want to encourage you, Pastor, don't allow your own eating habits and your own health habits right now to destroy your ministry. A lot of your sluggishness, a lot of your sleepiness, a lot of your lack of energy, you can ascribe it and say, well, I'm just getting old. maybe that's true. But then take a look at the scale. Take a look at what you're doing exercise-wise. If you're overweight, don't try to lose 50 pounds tomorrow. Make a goal. Can you lose a pound a week? Make that a goal. And then start walking. If you can't go to a gym, get out and do a walk for a day or do something to exercise. Begin to make progress towards that goal. You know, I go to the gym at times and I see people who come in there. I've seen people go in there and they're like 300 pounds. They're way overweight. But good for them. At least they're there. They're trying. They're trying to start something. You know, it's that famous idea, the judgment-free zone of Planet Fitness. I like that idea. Instead of judging people, it's not a matter of everybody going in there and being a musclehead. It's a matter of, hey, what can I do to encourage you to meet your goals? If you're 300 pounds, maybe your goal is to get to 290. That's a good goal. See, it's all relative to where you are right now. I want to see you succeed in ministry. I want to see you be around next year. I wish my friend Jan were still around. I really do. I miss him. I miss his laughter. I miss his encouragement. I miss his teaching. I miss everything about him. And I want to look at my own health and say, listen, if I intend to be around for as long as I believe God wants me to be, I'm going to have to take some action right now, because if I eat the way I want to, I won't be around. I'll just eat myself right into COVID itself or something like that, where I'll make myself more susceptible to sickness, more susceptible to aches and pains. I wanted to report to you also, and this has been, as I say, a long podcast, but I wanted to report to you also. I started this podcast by talking about the fact that I went to a doctor and he put me on high blood pressure pills. I haven't been on high blood pressure pills for a long time because I lost the weight. And then when I went to see the doctor again, he said, you don't need them. I also noticed that a lot of the aches and pains that I were having in my knees and my legs and my feet disappeared miraculously. Folks, that wasn't healing. That was my body saying, thank you. Thank you for paying attention to our needs. That's the feet speaking. That's the knees speaking. That's the hips speaking. Thank you for helping me. After all these years, I've been helping you. Thanks for helping me. High blood pressure is not something that is normal for people. And you can get that pressure down in most cases just by losing the weight. You also know that type 2 diabetes is a direct result of overweight. All of these are diseases that can be avoided, and they start with learning how to eat properly. I want to encourage you today to begin to investigate. How can you get healthier in 2022? I hope this has been an encouragement to you. I'm not here to condemn you. I don't want to make you feel bad. I have many friends that are in various weight classes. I'm heavier than some and lighter than others. I just want to see you healthy. And if there's any way that I can help you in that way, I'm not a health expert. Nothing I've said in this podcast comes from medical experience or anything like that. I'm sharing with you my own journey. And it's going to be a journey that continues throughout the rest of my life. I want to be healthy and have to take the steps every day to get healthy. It's pretty cool when you have a body that starts to contribute to you instead against you. And a lot of things that, again, where I was saying, well, it's just about old age, they just don't exist anymore. I don't have those aches and pains. There's a few aches and pains I still have, but I'm working on that with exercise. I've got some back pains. And I used to say, well, that's just part of getting old. Or it's part of having a weak back. And there's exercises for that. So I hope that you take this encouragement in the spirit that it was given. I really do love you. I want to see you healthy in this coming year. I'm going to be hopefully beginning to get back into the normal practice of podcasting. I've got a couple of podcasts that are coming up, and I hope they're a blessing to you. I'd like to offer you a free download today. Tips on how to lose weight. These are some practical ideas that I've learned along the way that I believe are going to help you. So just click the link, and it'll take you to that free download. No obligation. I hope it helps you. And as you know, before we go, I end each podcast with a quote, especially for you. This one is from a real tender guy, General George Patton, who said, an active mind cannot exist in an inactive body. An active mind cannot exist in an inactive body. Well, thank you, George. Until next time. Hey, before you go, can you please leave me a comment, like, and subscribe? I would greatly appreciate it.